It's tea time. I mean, it's always tea time, but it's time for a fresh cup of tea and a little talk about the books I've been reading. I have been absent for the last month and a half, and I'm not going to give any excuses. I've been reading, I've just been enjoying the fall, and I wasn't really motivated to film, but now I am. So here I am with a recent reads video. And this is by no means everything I read, it's just what I recall reading at this point. I'm going to start with something I started reading in September after going to the theater and seeing It. I had never read any Stephen King before, but the trailer for that movie looked really good, and so I went and saw it with a friend, and I loved it. I love the story, I love the acting, I love the fact that I recognized the covered bridge they used in the film. Fun fact, the covered bridge used in that film is actually the West Montrose Kissing Bridge in southern Ontario, which is sort of near Guelph, if you're familiar with Ontario at all. But I saw that movie and loved it, so naturally I had to go to the chapters and pick up this. And I specifically chose this cover because I didn't want the movie cover with Georgie in his rain gear. Because I like the kind of the minimalist whiteness of this with that creepy smile. And it was very, very good. It took me about a week to get through all 1,300 pages or so, reading it on my lunch breaks and whatnot. And I think I sat down on a Saturday or a Sunday and just plowed through the rest of it. And I loved it so much that I watched the TV movie from the 1990s, and then I went and saw the movie adaptation that just came out for a second time last weekend, and this was a 5-star book for me. And it caused me to pick up some more Stephen King, which is what I'm going to talk about next here. So after It, I went to the local Value Village, hit up the book section, and I found Firestarter by Stephen King. And it's about a little girl who has kind of telekinesis powers, but they call it pyrokinesis. And what she can do is light fires with her mind. And it's very problematic, especially for her, because she doesn't always know that she's about to do it. She doesn't always keep control of it. And especially as a baby, she would do things like light the draperies in her crib on fire and burn her teddy bear. And her parents had to train her from a young age that this was not something good to do, that setting mommy's hands on fire would hurt mommy, and so she couldn't do it. But this little girl, Charlie, and her father are on the run from the secret government organization because they found out about Charlie and they want to steady her. Some people are concerned that as she gets older she'll have immense powers, the sort of powers where she could crack the world in two just with her mind. And her father has very basic powers. He's able to push people, get them to agree with him. It comes across kind of as like brainwashing. And Charlie's mother was able to like close the fridge door with her mind and that sort of thing. And it all goes back to this lab experiment that Charlie's parents took part in when they were in college. And it was really a phenomenal book. Not as good as It, but it was really, really good, and you found yourself rooting for Charlie even though she's harming a lot of people. So after that, I decided to go back and read Carrie by Stephen King, which of course is his first novel, and we all know the story of Carrie. Young woman, very sheltered upbringing, bullied in school, uses her powers of telekinesis to murder everybody at the spring formal. And I really love this one. Not nearly as well developed in terms of characters as some of Stephen King's later novels. The characters in Firestarter are definitely more developed. They have more depth. You find yourself cheering them on more than you would when you read Carrie. From that, I decided I wanted to read his second book, which is Salem's Lot. And so I read this a week and a half ago, I believe. And this one was phenomenal too. I've yet to come across anything that isn't really good by Stephen King. Small town in Maine. This writer returns to this town where he spent a number of years in his childhood because he has this idea that he wants to write about these murders and kind of demonic forces that he senses around this old house in this town. And when he arrives, children start to go missing, which of course is very reminiscent of It. Children go missing in that book as well. But this one, it was a shocker halfway through because I was starting to get hints of what the creature was that was living in this town actually was. But when I realized that it was indeed a vampire, I started to realize just how much I was loving it because it reminded me of Dracula, which I think is why I loved it, because I do like a little bit of that vampire fiction when it's well written. I'm a huge fan of Dracula, and this of course brought up plot points from Dracula and made references to that, and so I love that about this one as well. From Salem's Lot, I moved on to 11/22/63, which was phenomenal as well. I think next to It, this is probably my favorite Stephen King I've read so far. I read this one last weekend on Saturday and Sunday. And if you don't know the premise, it is about a small town English teacher who is called to his friend's diner, where his friend shows him a portal that takes him back to a specific day in 1958. And his friend is dying of cancer because he's been back in the late 50s, early 60s for a number of years. And he's not going to be able to fulfill his mission that he set to do. And so he's asking his friend, this English teacher, to go back in time and do it for him. He wants him to save John F. Kennedy, with the belief that if John F. Kennedy is not assassinated, then a lot of things in history afterwards will change and the world will be better for it. There will be less death. When our character goes back in time, though, he meets a woman and he falls in love, and he contemplates not even returning to the future, or at one point actually bringing her to the future. Because this portal takes him back to a specific day in 1958, he has to wait out the years until 1963. So he returns to work as a teacher, and he moves to this small town near Dallas, Texas, and ends up kind of taking the school drama club into his hands and putting on plays. And he tries to save the lives of a number of people and change their fate, but he finds it very difficult because there's some sort of force that just doesn't want time to be changed, and that force of course comes into play later in the novel, and you see just how problematic changing time really is. So after I read that, I've moved on to Stephen King's Insomnia, which I'm reading now, and I won't talk about that too much because I'm not done it. But in addition to that, just really quickly, I see I'm almost out of time on my camera. I read The Time in Between, A Memoir of Hunger and Hope by Nancy Tucker, which is a memoir of a girl with an eating disorder. In addition to that, I read Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, which is a memoir of a young woman with borderline personality disorder. And then I ended up picking up something at the thrift store as well. Those last two are from the thrift store. Really cheap books. I thought I'd read them, but Jen Campbell's Weird Things Customers Say in Bookstores. Saw this, had to have it. I think I might turn it into a Christmas gift for someone. I'm not sure I should be saying that on my channel because the person who it's for, they occasionally watch my videos, but I'm out of time.